Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Deku has Kakashi abilities part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends, and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. He wasn't sure what happened. One moment, Kakashi was relishing his retirement period and on the way to visit Guy. The next thing he knew, he was standing in the middle of a pentagon drawn in blood, next to a corpse, in an unknown setting, with extinguished candles around him. What, he thought. Kai. The scene remained. Kai. Still no change. So it wasn't just a bad joke. He was actually, truly, summoned. He didn't even know he was summonable. He edged out of the crudely drawn pentagon, a kunai in hand. He nudged the body with a boot, confirming the death of the unknown person. Before he could do anything else, the door swung open. Instantly, he was on the ceiling, a genjutsu casted to hide his presence. The person was wearing a black cloak, much like the one the deceased person was wearing. Upon seeing the corpse, he wailed and threw himself next to the body, wailing. More black cloak people streamed in, equally gasping in horror and crying at the sight of their deceased leader. The thing was, he didn't really know. He could discern that they were probably a cult that summoned him. Yet, their chakra were markedly different. They still had chakra, but it was subdued and faint, barely noticeable. Konoha's own untrained civilians had more chakra than them. Secondly, he sensed no chakra in the room, not even in the blood etched on the floor. How did they manage to summon him then? He didn't want to acknowledge that he was actually, literally, summonable. What a pain it was to consider, but that was the most likely explanation. Thirdly, when they started speaking, it was in a rapid-fire language that sounded familiar, yet not quite. He could still tell what they were saying, but it was with some difficulty. Some of the vocabulary and sentence structure they used were foreign and unorthodox. As in, he had never heard them before in his life. Ever. Kakashi was bemused. Where exactly had he been transported to? There were 7 of them, all of varying age. Some had odd features, like a fish head man or a person with wood-like textured skin, which made him wonder if they were experiments of a sort. Maybe they were the last of Orochimaru's experiments, and they found his DNA and summoned him through unknown means. He casted that thought to the back of his mind and focused on their conversation, attempting to make sense of his predicament before planning his next move. No, leader. What will we do, N? Did not work. Takeshi-san died in vain. No? Suppose to summon a strong fighter to serve us. What powers on Imagina? A hoax, I told you. Ah, so he was right. He was supposedly summoned by them. It seems they were unaware of his presence though. Quite foolish, he thought, to be unaware of the abilities of their, well, summon. Nonetheless, he was not complaining. Kakashi did not want to be a tool for anyone, especially not for a group this dumb. He'll let the lead now. We need a new leader. Suddenly, Fish Head Man's fishy eyes swiveled to a spot on the ceiling, near where he was cloaked. Wait. I think I sense someone. They stilled. Dog-nosed minions started sniffing the air. Kakashi tensed, then relaxed. Analyzing their physique, he knew that he could probably take them on blindfolded even they tried to attack him all at once. Time for some fun, then. Without warning, he flung 3 kunes down. They were barely an inch away from 3 members' foot, blades buried deep into the wood all the way to the hilt. Simultaneously, he released the genjutsu, dropping to the ground in a crouch. Yo, he said, flipping his kunai nonchalantly. Can someone tell me? He paused as his color intent spiked. Where I am. They screamed. It was nice to know that he could still incite fear. His students no longer screamed whenever he tried anything. He kind of missed it, honestly. The next thing that surprised him was the fireball that came flying to his face. Ah, memories. Followed by some green whip sent by Tree Girl, and then the assortment of knives, shoes and a candle. In less than 10 seconds, he had knocked out the fireball sender. What? It wasn't chakra. He didn't use chakra. How is that possible? The Tree Girl, what? Was she Zetsu's love child? Is it even possible? Did Zetsu even had sex? He didn't want to know. Truly, just know. And virtually everyone except one lone member staring at him, trembling. Poor child. With the kunai to their neck, he drawled, so. They probably burst into tears. I'll tell you. I'll tell you everything, please don't kill me. And so had a Kakashi, elite jounin, ex-Anbu captain, ex-Hokage, ex-leader of Team 7, boss of the Hinohinama Heiji Haddock pack, honorary uncle to some brats, and proud sensei to 3 cute not so little, no longer genin students, said Brat's parents, found out about this universe. The quirk-filled heroes villains universe with no chakra wielders. And there was no way back. What do you mean there's no way back? Kakashi pressed the knife a little harder to their throat. The poor person gave a low sob. We did some research, Takeshi and I, before trying to summon you. See, Takeshi can look into different universes. He can also summon small creatures and things from them. That's what make him cool and the irrefutable leader of. Cut to the chase. Anyway, we did some research before we summoned you, and apparently he, randomly chanced upon your universe stream, but he said nothing other than the great power your universe people wield, and how this can be the thing to make us great, to finally make our name as Renownedville. The pressure on their neck increased minutely. Wait. Sorry, I'll make it fast. They cleared their throat nervously. Only he knows the exact universe you're from, because there's so many similar ones. Alternate universes count too, you know. I think he pulled you out randomly from one of the many alternate universes from the Shinobi universe stream. The wielder knows best, so he might be able to send you back, but he's dead now and CC can't. There was a beat. This was a new low for dumb villain plans he had ever had the misfortune to witness. Usually, they would be in his favor, but not this time. Why didn't he just sacrifice another body and remain alive? Why couldn't he have just remained alive? So that I could have forced him to send me back. Maybe that was why. Oh, that would be smarter than expected. Kakashi hated this Takahashi already, first for summoning him, like a dog. Then throwing him into an entirely new foreign world without a way back, and finally dying on him, so he could not even glean satisfaction from maiming him or forcing the man to send him back. I don't know. He didn't share much details besides needing a sacrifice, an exchange, and he said it'll be worth it, but we didn't expect. They gave another low sob, followed by a ghastly guy like Quail. Nothing is worth your life, Takeshi. Okay, that's it. He always said to expect the unexpected, but this was too much. Who would ever expect this? Naruto craziness and the insane level of craziness that generally followed Naruto had never sufficiently prepared him for this. It must be his innate bad luck. He knew it. Quickly, he knocked the person out, tied everyone up, and hastily left the room with Crazy. Maybe it was contagious. It was apparently a refurbished, dilapidated shed he was in, with the exterior looking old and rotten, unlike its relatively nice interior, minus the bloodstains that was, for once, so not his fault. The shed was in the middle of a forest, just his luck. He followed the small, well-worn road from the shed, until he chanced upon a small village, well hidden among the trees. He almost laughed. You could say it was a Konohagakure no Sato, but it's not his Konohagakure no Sato. He walked into one of the stores and was given the stink eye by the bored-looking cashier. Upon telling them he caught a bunch of villains in the nearby shed, her look changed to one of awe before she quickly dialed for the police. Her grandmother shuffled out from the storeroom behind and gave him a beady-eyed look. Leaning heavily on her walking stick, she eyed his attire suspiciously. "You hero, old man." He hummed. Something like that. Internally, he choked. Old man. He was only in his 40s, his hair was silver, damn it, and who was this old lady to call him an old man? She snorted, scratching the wart on the nose. "You speak funny." Kakashi looked distinctively uncomfortable as the old lady cackled. When the police arrived, he gave a heavily modified recount of the attack, watching with some massive satisfaction as they were led away. There was a devil with glowing hands. Fishman was rambling to the bored-looking policeman, barely struggling as he was led to the car. Kakashi caught his eye in passing, and raised his hand in greeting. "Yo." He screamed. "Devil. Demon. That's what I was referring to. We have created a demon, what have we done?" The policeman merely sighed as he stuffed the struggling amateur villain into the car. "What was that about?" the policewoman recording his recount asked. He shrugged innocently, hiding his face behind his beloved Icha. At least he had 2 copies with him. No idea. He hadn't had this much fun since his students were genins. As a sign of gratitude for vanquishing the pesky villains, the villagers offered a reward. "Ma, if that's the case, can I have a place to stay, or maybe a job?" "I don't have anywhere to go," he said sheepishly. A generous, bubbly elderly couple that reminded him of Minato-sensei and Kushina-ni-san offered both. "We live nearby, in a farm. You can stay with us and help us for as long as you like, Mr. Fujioka," the elderly man said warmly. He felt a lump at his throat. He was absolutely sure Naruto's parents would have been like them, had they actually lived on. There was a dull ache in his chest from thinking of what could never be. "Thank you," he said roughly. Wrinkled, calloused hands wrapped around his equally calloused ones. "No, thank you." For all that his universe was advancing in technology, this universe seemed to take it to the next level. He was fine with carriages and things on wheels, but an enclosed metallic compartment on wheels that seemed to run on some sort of electricity. Sounds like a death trap. Yet the elderly ushered him into the kuruma, laughing when he protested as if he was joking. He wasn't. However, whatever manners he did manage to retain from incessant nagging of others, decreed that he listen to the helpful elderly. Also, how can a shinobi flee from any challenge? Senses alert for any signs of danger, he steeled his nerves and carefully opened the door. The interior light switched on. He slammed the door immediately, already 2 steps back and with a ball of crackling purple lightning formed in one hand. After realizing nothing happened, he let the lightning fizzle out, flushing under his mask. Suddenly, Kakashi felt very old. Screw this. He wasn't ready for this. He was going to be like a good and intelligent shinobi, make a tactical retreat, and come up with an alternate plan. The couple, bless their souls, barely reacted to his overreaction. Mrs. Fujioka chuckled good-naturedly. That's a nice quirk. What's it called? He paused, then said lamely, lightning quirk. The car wouldn't bite, come on. Mr. Fujioka beckoned them to get in. The moment their backs were turned, he created a shadow clone to take his stead as he Kawarimi-ed his ass out of there. He felt nary an ounce of regret or shame for sending his clone to suffer in his place. Nope, not at all. Hiding behind the trees, he watched as his clone stiffly entered the car, this time carefully not displaying any reaction. It perched precariously at the edge of the seat. To Kakashi, his clone looked extremely uneasy, but it must have looked calm enough to satisfy the couple. Heck yeah, acting skills. He knew his experiences of running around as Sukiya would someday come into handy. The rickety thing rumbled to life, then down the road they went. Kakashi was impressed, it was faster than expected. He quickly followed the car, careful to remain hidden by the foliage. Half an hour into the ride, his clone seemingly relaxed enough to lean against the door and stare out of the window. Cheeky thing even waved cheerfully at him as he jumped from branch to branch, obviously enjoying itself while he suffered. Although still distrustful of the car, the distrust would remain until he pried the moving contraption apart and learned how it worked. It didn't so bad after all. Also, his clone survived the ride unscathed. Impressive. They went on until the trees thinned, and the forest gave way to rolling acres of green, stretching to as far as he could see. Hills covered with more trees sat in the distance. The rows of fields were systematic and very much like those he used to see back at home. A lone scarecrow waved lazily in the breeze, looking right at home among the lettuces. Kakashi already felt a deep sense of kinship to the scarecrow. He could relate on a spiritual level. Flowing with the currents, bending but never breaking under will of the wind, braving harsh storms and unforgiving weather alone, the silent and underrated guardian of others. They were going to be best buds. Kakashis, after all, stuck together. At their quaint yet decent cottage, he scouted the area while Mrs. Fujioka settled his clone into the guest room. They grew tomatoes and lettuce, among other plants, he noted. The security was thoroughly lacking, but he planned to fix that as soon as he could. He already had an emergency escape route, followed by a contingency plan, and a contingency of the contingency plan planned out. After the general layout of the farm and cottage was committed to memory, he slipped back into the guest room. The moment Mrs. Fujioka's back was turned, the clone was dispersed and Kakashi neatly stepped into position. Memories flooded him, pleasant right indeed. There was even an air conditioner. Wow, he's almost jealous, confirming what he already knew. Threat level. Mr. Uki. Absolutely nothing. She was still chattering incessantly as she changed the bed sheets. I hope it's to your liking, she said. Thank you, Fujioka-sama, he said, speech halting. It was easier to understand what they were saying once he got used to their smoother, more lilting accent. Furthermore, he could make intelligent inferences, guesswork, for the unknown vocabulary and sentence structure. When she turned to face him, her eyes widening slightly before relaxing again. She grinned, slapping his arm jovially. He tensed minutely. Now there, no need to be so polite. You'll be living with this old couple from now on. How about taking some time to settle down before heading down? We'll have to work out some details with you. He said, not quite catching everything she rattled. Before he could ask for clarification, she had hobbled out of the room and was down the stairs. Okay, he said slowly, scratching his head. What was he supposed to do now? He surveyed the room first, taking in details initially overlooked. The room was painted a neutral brown, fitted with a small table, cupboard and a bed that was 5 degrees off-center. The room had a small but personal toilet. Sharing bathrooms was a hassle. There was a stone paperweight resembling an extremely ugly version of Pakin on the table, 5 cracks on the ceiling, and 2 visible stretch of stitches on the pale pink curtains. He could hear Mr. Fujioka puttering around with the pots and pans downstairs, but both the security and sound insulation could be fixed with a few well-placed jutsus. He looked out of the window, past the blossoming flower box on the window ledge and the rows of lettuces below. The sun washed the sky with stunning streaks of reds and oranges as it dipped below the horizon. He could get used to this, he thought. The peaceful lull that had fallen was broken by the cause of some evil crow. Crows reminded him of Itachi, which reminded him that he needed to reinforce his room now. Kakashi doubted the civilians would even notice. The basic jutsus were cast at first, soon teeming the room with familiar chakra. He nodded approvingly, taking comfort in the knowledge that it would probably take Tenzu almost an hour to break in, unscathed, at its current state. The more complex, Hokage-approved ones would have to wait for later. He swore it was for safety's sake. All 20 overlapping jutsus in that tiny space of a room were all necessary security. Of course. It definitely wasn't overkill. You think it's paranoia? He thought sarcastically at the pug paperweight judging him through gray, squinty eyes. It's not paranoia if you were summoned to another universe. It's not. He could deal with an alien world, or a different dimension, or a parallel universe. But an entirely foreign world, from what did the villain call it, a different universe stream? That was pushing it. Ugly didn't look convinced. Awkwardly, he sat down on his bed, bounced a few times, deemed it too soft, then stood up again. Finally, not really knowing what to do, he turned around on the spot. "Dinner is ready, Haddock-san," Mr. Fujioka shouted from downstairs. "Coming." Ambling to the dog paperweight, he patted its head absently once, stopping at the door to apply a shock jutsu, as a warning, before making his way down to the dining room. Shift 3. Dinner was more flavorful than expected, and chattier than he was used to. The Fujiokas were, understandably, curious, nosy, about him. "Your name's Kakashi, right?" Mr. Fujioka asked in between mouthfuls of rice. Kakashi longed to eat quickly, and even considered the use of chakra to force his food down at an abnormal rate. He decided against it since he had to do the social interaction thing anyway. Which way? Instead, he let his mask pull around his neck. They wouldn't be interested in his face anyway, since there wasn't that whole hubbub surrounding his mask here. Yes. His obligation to respond didn't stop him from giving short answers. "Where are you from?" "Kanahagakure no Sato." They chuckled. So are we. But what's the name of your village?" He grinned ruefully. "It's actually just that. Konoha." "I've never heard of that," Mrs. Fujioka mused. "Have you heard of that, Daichi?" Mr. Fujioka shook his head as he reached for another piece of fish. "Can't say I have." "Not from around here, are you?" "Ah, no. We're an actual hidden village, top secrecy." "Oh?" He paused. "What brings you here, then?" "It's my first time out and I got lost on the road of life." Mrs. Fujioka actually placed down her chopsticks in bewilderment. "The first time, sorry, were you chased out?" When he stared, flabbergasted, at her. How in the world had she came across that conclusion? "I knew it. Children these days, thinking they can chase their parents out once they reach their 20s. She said indignantly. "It happened to our neighbors too, and they were such nice." "Ah, no, that's not the case," he quickly interrupted, desperate to put a halt to this madness immediately. "Grandchildren, then? That's worse." No, he protested, mind looping around the absurd idea of having spawns. "Children. Grandchildren. Sage of six paths, no. I'm only in my 40s. And I don't have kids." Oh, I'm so sorry." A look of mortification crossed her face. She turned to punch her husband in the arm. "He's under 60. I said he may have grandchildren, but you were the one who brought it up," he grumbled. "But you have to admit, the hair." Kakashi's hand went up to his hair protectively, expression affronted. "I was born with silver hair," he said defensively. If anyone noticed that his voice was higher pitched than usual, they said nothing. "They look dubious." "If that's what you say," Mr. Fujioka said skeptically. He deflated a little. It was the first time someone thought he was a 60-years-old man with grandchildren who kicked him out of his village. It was a bit of a blow to his vanity, honestly. Did he look that old? No, that could not be the case. That must not be the case. He was still in his springtime of Yo and Okami. That sounded just like Guy thought. They continued their dinner in relative silence, with Mrs. Fujioka looking his way every now and then. Initially, he assumed it was her checking that he had enough to eat. However, those sneaking side glances did not stop even after he finished eating and pulled up the mask. Her eyes roved around his physique, as if searching for something. Kakashi didn't know how to feel about that. If he was being honest, he would say that he was unnerved. However, if you asked him, he would say he was deeply suspicious and totally not creeped out. She seemed to be under the impression that he didn't notice. As if a shinobi could miss such badly disguised staring. Finally, he could take it no more. When her eyes darted over again, he deliberately made eye contact with her and held it. "Can I help you, Fujioka-san?" To her credit, she only blushed a little. Her husband just sighed, finished his rice and headed to the kitchen get some fruits. "Your life energy shifts and flows," she finally said, "and it's very abundant. I've never seen that before." "Never." Her eyes glinted as she leaned forward excitedly. Instinctively, he leaned back. "Pardon my rudeness, but is it related to your quirk?" He blinked, subconsciously taking the plate of fruit offered by Mr. Fujioka, as his mind tried to process the rapid procession of words. "Can you repeat that more slowly?" "Oh? It'll make more sense if I explain my quirk first." She settled back, waiting for her husband to rejoin her before speaking again. "I can see the life energy in people. It's a passive quirk, so I can always see it. Usually, people's energies are concentrated along their spine and organs, and they don't flow much, especially not in such concentrated amounts. Yours, on the other hand." She made wild gestures across his body, as if tracing his chakra pathways. His eyes widened. He straightened, giving her his full attention. "You can see chakra." "Chakra? Is that what you called it?" "Somewhat," he hedged. In your terms, it's life energy. What a weird phrase. That can be manipulated, I guess." Had he found a chakra sensor in this universe, in a world with no usable chakra? What were the odds? And seriously, what's the use? She hummed thoughtfully. It created that lightning bolt from before, right? Yeah. Chakra can do more than that too. He smiled, then stood up. Like this. He walked up the wall, hands in pocket. Their amazed expressions made him feel like he was showing off to Genins again. Those little brats were always the easiest to impressive. I've never seen anyone's energy behave like that before, not even pro heroes, she marveled. Nice to know that he was the only chakra manipulator around the vicinity. Why do you say a quirk is lightning manipulating, then? Mr. Fujioka asked. Kakashi shrugged, walking back to his seat. He has only been here for a few hours. How was he to know what was counted as an acceptable quirk? Now, he had an inkling that all quirks were accepted because none were normal. People get too nosy, he said instead. Are you a pro hero, Haddock-san? With that quirk and attire, their eyes lingered on his headband and flak jacket. Oh, no, he laughed nervously, rubbing his neck with one hand. The attire is common in, my village. I'm not aiming to be a hero either. It was thankful he no longer has the Sharingan. That would cause an even larger headache, oh gosh. A spinning red eye that can open up into another dimension would be hell to explain. Although, maybe, that could be his way back home. Could he really jump dimensions through it though? Maybe he would have needed someone to open up a portal from his universe first. Oh wait, Abito was dead too. Even if he still had the Sharingan and went to the Kamui dimension, there was no one else to open the gateway from his universe and haul his ass back. Never mind then. No point thinking about it anyway. Why not? Maybe because I wasn't from this world. My village, he said slowly, don't have, pro heroes. And it's not what I want to do. I see. Mr. Fujioka's eyes sharpened onto him. The atmosphere turned serious. What do you want to do, then, Haddock-san? He stared intently at the shinobi as he steepled his fingers together in front of his face, leaning forward with his elbows on his table. Kakashi knew their opinion of him depended not just on his answer, but also on his approach to the question. He blinked slowly, unfazed. Be a farmer, he said monotonously, and live up to my name. They stared. Suddenly, Mr. Fujioka gave a startled, low, throaty laugh, and the tension was broken. Well, then, he said, smiling warmly, how does starting tomorrow sound? There was a knock on the doorframe. He looked up from his book as Mrs. Fujioka peeked her head in. Haddock-san, here's some clothes that wow, did you do something to the room? Yeah, safety seals. Hookage level safety seals, in fact. It's all over the farm too. I hope you don't mind, Fujioka-san. Oh, you don't have to do that. He smiled. Please, it's no trouble, Fujioka-san. At least let me ensure your safety. And his peace of mind. Well, thank you, then. Your white energy is very strong. You can see the color too. Kakashi was impressed. Of course. Everyone has different colors and intensity. I can even discern the nature of a person through their life force. Nature as in their personality. Their skill was not quite chakra sensing, then, but even more complex at that. Haha, maybe not that far. It's like a vague indication of a person's disposition. I've realized that the clearer the life energy, hard to put it in words, you have to see it to understand, the more trustworthy they are. That, Kakashi had to admit, was so cool. Ibiki would have had a field day exploiting her quirk. And your energy, she continued, is very clear. He was speechless. She winked. Why do you think we have so much trust in you, almost stranger? Sadly, Mr. Fujioka's old clothes could not fit him. He was much too tall. He guessed he had to rely on his other set of standard shinobi uniform from his emergency storage seal, until he bought new clothes then. At night, he disappeared into the forest to scout the area and terrain. He was pleased to find that the animals were the same. Had there been some mutant hybrid animals in this universe, he didn't think he would react to them well. Most of his jutsus were in working order as well, with one exception. Summoning jutsu. It just didn't work. None of his dogs appeared, even though the jutsu definitely activated. He supposed even summons could not cross the boundaries of universe. His heart ached at the thought of never seeing his pack again. He knew he had to move forward, like he always did, plow through and make the best of his situations, but he still missed his family. If he checked if the moon was red, it was no one's business but his. Kakashi was quieter than usual the next day. Mr. Fujioka introduced him to the other farm hands, a lovely Ms. Takahashi and another part-timer whose name eluded him. They were welcoming, politely accepting his odd attire, his aversion to speaking. Farming in shinobi attire wasn't too bad. It almost reminded Kakashi of all those D missions he sent his minions out to. Alas, this time round, it was no slacking for him. On day 3, the urgency to obtain new clothes increased. With no usable money, there was only one way left. Ah, Fujioka-san, may I borrow some money to purchase new clothes? Sure. Actually, how about directly deducting it from your salary? If that's alright with you, alright. The salary wasn't much as the couple didn't earn much from farming as well, but he guessed it was decent. He wasn't sure since the pricing of goods here was foreign to him. Anyway, he hadn't expected anything much besides meals and a room. Does your village use a different currency? In response, he pulled out a wad of the ryo he had. Mr. Fujioka gaped. They use old currency. His tone was one of awe. He quickly stuffed the Ryo into the pocket before the farmer noticed the leaf sigil on the notes. So, we'll go shopping with you tomorrow, Mrs. Fujioka interjected cheerily as she wandered past with a basket of laundry. Her husband groaned in response. Shift 4. They drove to a town a little away from the forest. The weather was still cooling despite it being late spring. Mrs. Fujioka chattered the whole way through, pointing out the different neighbors and giving a running commentary about them. He listened with half a ear, taking note of their quirks and jobs. Apparently, it was bad form to ask after one's quirk, but socially acceptable to share them with others. He wasn't sure. They first dragged him to a round of clothes shopping. He picked up some casual farmer-friendly attire, slacks, and more civilian clothes he had rarely ever had the chance to wear. They just didn't seem practical when he was an active shinobi, but he hardly had much of a choice now if he wanted to blend in. He even bought some of those jeans that Sasuke favored. His kids must be so proud. You look great, Mrs. Fujioka gushed while the assistant couldn't stop staring at his rear. Alas, his type of masks were not on sale. They looked at him funny when he suggested it. One shopkeeper took one look at him, puffed up his chest and indignant, grabbed a broom, and yelled, "We don't sell hero costume here. We sell clothes. Good, civilian clothes." Shit, Mr. Fujioka muttered, "I forgot about that. Run. Kakashi did the most logical thing. He ran. Mr. Fujioka emerged a little after, looking pale. The shop was still emitting horrifying screams of outrage. He shuddered. Kakashi was almost afraid to ask. He did so anyway. "Do I want to K?" "No?" "Okay." Mrs. Fujioka offered him an alternative. Surgical masks. According to her, it wasn't weird to wear cloth masks, especially to cover up quirks. However, those mask shirts he favored were usually worn by heroes, or the very occasional citizen with odd quirks, so special customization was required, should he wish to purchase them. Nah, Kakashi thought. It was too much of a hassle now. Kakashi had realized it was his shinobi attire that resembled a hero's costume. With civilian clothes, at least he wouldn't look like one anymore, even if he did wear a mask. That meant his old mask shirt could stay without inciting too much unwanted attention from others. Wouldn't want to stand out now. Even so, he decided to get some typical surgical masks as a precaution. It's all the rage now, she assured him as he hovered over the range of mask designs. He really didn't care as long as he had something comfortably masked. He settled for a simple black mask that could cover the bottom half of his face entirely. It was not like his skin-tight mask shirt, but it was only a backup anyway. In the event his current mask gave way and was unsalvageable, at least he would have another mask with him. The last mask shirt he had would be saved for the utmost emergency. It was better than nothing. On their way to their next stop, the Fujiokas chanced upon their nearest neighbors, the Kamadas. They greeted each other excitedly as Kakashi lingered awkwardly at the back, hand twitching for his icha, but not wanting to ruin the Fujioka's image by association. He had already formulated an escape route when Mrs. Fujioka beckoned him forward, thwarting all his plans. "This is Hada Kakashi, our latest tenant and assistant," Mrs. Fujioka introduced. He raised his hand into a wave. "Yo," he drawled. "Nice to meet you. I'm Kamada Tomi, and this is my wife, Kamada Kyo." He stuck out his hand cheerfully, and reluctantly, Kakashi shook it. The first thing that struck Kakashi was Kamada Tomi's striking green hair. The second thing that stood out was his enthusiastic attitude and penchant for chatter. When the obligatory introductions were over, he retreated to semi-hide behind Mr. Fujioka. Thankfully, Mrs. Fujioka quickly engaged them in small talk. "How's Inko?" "Oh, she's fine. She's coming back to visit with her son during the summer holidays." He tuned them out until they exchanged goodbyes. The electronics store was next. "I lost my phone. It was old and tiny anyway." "What? You getting one now?" The Fujiokas gravitated towards some interestingly flat televisions on display when a salesperson took the opportunity to pounce on him. "Hi sir. Would you like to view the latest model of the mighty phone?" she said cheerfully, the epitome of a typical enthusiastic and perky salesperson. Not really." "Great choice," she said loudly over him, all but grabbing onto him. It wasn't like he had a choice when she was already dragging him to the huge, flat phone on display. Now, this phone's outstanding features include an extremely sensitive touchscreen and... The moment he set eyes on the phone, he was instantly captivated. The phone fitted nicely into his hand and was sleek, thin, and black. The screen lit up when it was touchscreen, she said. It didn't even have a keypad. It was super advanced technology. Highly progressive. He had never seen any phones like that before. They had phones in his universe, sure, but it was a relatively new concept. Konoha's phones were either the flippy sort or the tiny compact ones, with a keypad and a pixelated screen with muted colors. Compared to this sleek evolution, his old phone was a huge lumbering bear of clumsy. "What can it do?" he interrupted her. She was startled out of her monologuing. "What can it do?" "Functions. The functions of a phone." She brightened. "Ah. It has all the basic functions. calls, messaging, emails, the internet, music, downloadable games and more. This model can also track your health. Not understanding half of what she was saying, he tuned out and instead opted to explore the phone. It amused him greatly that a light, careful touch, he was very, very careful, was all it took to light up the colorful, high-resolution screen. He scrolled through the little icons and finally pressed the internet icon. It redirected to a site with the Google on it. His eyes widened. It was so cool. That's a search engine, Mr. Fujioka said from behind him. Kakashi, engrossed as he was, barely registered the Fujioka's presences. The salesgirl had wandered off earlier after realizing he wasn't listening. Search engine. Mrs. Fujioka gave him a sympathetic look. She must really thought he lived in a backward, dubious society, as she began to detail the purpose of a search engine. They had something akin to the internet in Konoha, but it wasn't this advanced. He listened attentively, then nodded once, then twice. That's it. I'm getting this. They were taken aback by his response. Whoa, not so hasty. What's the rush? You don't need a phone to access the internet. He pointed to the nearest computer. It must cheaper than that. Also, he smirked, the porn will be worth it. At their aghast faces, he quickly added, just kidding. He actually wasn't. Have you checked out the price? He flipped the tag. This must be the price. From the pricing of things he had seen, it seemed that 1 ryo was almost equivalent to 10 yen. He did some quick calculations in his head and almost reeled back. Perhaps 86,200 ryo was too much for a little thing. Then again, it was the latest model. Mr. Fujioka deliberated a little. You do need a phone, though. What about the other models? Yeah. But they said this new model is very durable, as strong as All Might, whatever that may be. I wonder how durable before anyone could stop him. He started bending the phone into two. Hey Haddock-san, you'll break the phone. It involved a small scuffle, an almost broken phone and a sulking Kakashi that realized phones were still fragile, but they finally moved away from the mighty phone. In the end, it was a satisfied Kakashi left the shop with a 25,000 yen smartphone in his pocket. Right before they left, Kakashi saw something on one of the display windows that made him stop dead in his tracks. Haddock-san. What's the matter? He didn't deign them a reply, instead fixating his attention on a little pot of plant fluttering in the wind. Nostalgia rushed through him, tears prickling at the corner of his eyes, as he thought of a similar plant back at home, where he would never see it again. How he missed it. He hoped Tenzo would take care of it. Oh, do you wish to purchase a plant? Yes, he whispered. When they finally made it back to the car, he was holding the pot of plant almost reverently. Mr. Uki had stayed by his sides through tough times at home, giving him unending support and ever understanding, even when he forgot to water it. He was sure that Mr. Uki too would do the same for him here. It amazed him to find out that he spent close to 70,000 yen in an afternoon. It was money that was technically not yet his. He went from having 0 yen to having negative 70,000 yen. He didn't even know he could spend so much on a single person, himself, in a single day. Fujioka-san. Yeah. Thank you. The drive back was pleasant. Kakashi redecorated his room a little, mainly unpacking his new clothes, and setting Mr. Uki too on the little table, next to ugly Pakin's statue. Ever since his apartment was destroyed for the umpteenth time, the silver-haired shinobi had taken to carrying some, or a copy, of his precious things around with him. There were an especially customized small ceiling scroll and a hidden pocket sewn onto his skin-tight black inner shirt. He was fed up with having his house wrecked, each time for various different reasons. At least, if his possessions were with him, he would be responsible for its destruction, as compared to some wannabe chunin losing control of a fireball, and sending his apartment up in flames again. Or the pain incident, among other, more recent villains that had also partially succeeded in destroying Konoha. Or that one time when drunk Naruto thought it would be funny to summon Gamabunto over for a drink, only for the massive toad to raise his apartment to the ground, completely by accident on its part. Naruto later realized it wasn't funny at all when Kakashi bunked in with him, bringing an entire entourage of Andus along just cause. Too bad, if Kakashi had to make do without his entire Icha collection, then Naruto would also have to make do without Hinata time. It was always his apartment that suffered, every time without fail, no matter the amount of precautionary, preventive anti-anything jutsus placed on his house. He doesn't understand how. No, his possessions were much safer with him. Perhaps he should worry that the ceiling scroll might be torn while fighting or some other typical damage, but nah. Not only was he confident in his skills, he was also very safe in the village, especially during his term as Hokage. They had banned him from taking missions. It's too much of a risk, Hokage-sama. And his Anbu guards hovered too much, Tenzo's idea of a joke. The shinobi villages were currently at peace as well. Even if his securities were breached, should he be severely injured or defeated, then lost sentiments would be the least of his worries anyway. He couldn't bring everything along, but at least he had a copy of his most precious things with him. Some would call him a sentimental and paranoid old fool, but who's laughing now? Carefully, he extracted Team Minato's picture and placed it in a photo frame by his bed. The more recent Team Kakashi picture of him in Hokage garb, together with Tenzo and Sai, were also displayed. Perhaps he would put up the original Team 7 picture later on, he mused. He thumbed at the discolored picture of him and his dad, one of the few that survived his angry years and the multiple house destructions. He deliberated the other pictures he had in his stash, then decided against it. Minato-sensei's special three-pronged kunai was set aside, as well as Yuryu's last-ditch of Ichi book, along with the letter stuffed inside. Those went back into the special seal, tucked away safely. Mentally, he made a note to get a copy of all the pictures printed ASAP for safekeeping. 3 copies should be enough, all squirreled away in different locations. He should also find a way to store them in his phone too. He was not paranoid. It was all prudent precautions. The room looked slightly more familiar now. Mitsuraki too was a comforting presence, standing guard over his precious people once more. The ache in his heart eased a little. Finally, he felt a little less lonely. Fujioka-san. Both responded simultaneously. Yes. He paused, hesitating. Mrs. Fujioka laughed and smacked him with the back of her ladle. Mr. Fujioka was smirking ever so slightly as he continued slicing the vegetables. Finally, he was not the only victim. She hit people a lot. Thankfully, they felt like nothing. You've been here for over a week. No more formality. I'm Mariko-san, and he's Daichi-san, get it? He was slightly tentative. Then the same goes to you, Mariko-san. She cackled, stirring the soup. Oh, I'm planning on it, Kakashi-kun. He paled rapidly, choked, then disappeared into a flurry of leaves. Their internet was a wonderful place. Kakashi absolutely loved it. He would leave it at that. Kakashi also found out that All Might was the epitome of heroism in this world, always smiling and there to save the day. Blonde hair, blue eyes. Sounds familiar. Maybe it was a basic requirement of a hero, no matter the universe. He guessed he could see the appeal, but personally, he favored unsung heroes and those that disappear into the night. Like Shinobi. Like him. He knew he wasn't technically unsung or even unknown, but whatever. The concepts of heroes and what it entailed fascinated him, and soon he was spending time doing basic research on that too. He was searching for someone with a quirk that could cross universes, and maybe a pro hero could help him out. He soon settled in a routine that was breakfast, train, work, lunch, work, dinner, train. Often, he would send a shadow clone in his place for half a day while he trained or lazed in the forest. It was more often the former, believe it or not. He still wanted to keep his skills sharp, thank you very much. Then again, there was only so much he could do when training with himself. Kakashi had been working alongside the farmer for a little over a fortnight when he finally ventured out the sensitive question in this universe. Daichi-san, what is your quirk, if you don't mind me asking? He barely paused in his farming. Oh, I don't have one, actually. And I prefer it this way. Is it common? Being quirkless? Nah, not really. Only around 20% of the world's population is registered as quirkless. But I think quirks aren't worth all that hassle. He shoveled the soil. In the end, there's still people doing bad things and people trying to fix it. Quirk or no quirk, the world's still the same, isn't it? He thought about it and nodded. I think you're a wise man, Daichi-san. Not a wise man, just a simple farmer. I may not know much, but at least, I know my potatoes. He grinned. Soon, you will too. Come on, let me show you how I plant the lettuces. It was almost into the 3rd week when Mariko-san brought it up. Kakashi-san, may I know your ICANN bank account? We'll have to register you as our assistant so we can transfer your income to you. Can't believe I forgot. Sorry, what? Identity card. To transfer money to your bank. He groaned internally. Of course they had identity papers as well. What was he to do now? Forge them? Nah, no matter how skilled he was, he could not forge something he had never seen before. You don't have an IC, whoops, had he taken too long to answer. She paused to bellow across the house. Daichi, Kakashi-san, doesn't have an IC. What? We'll go to the police station tomorrow. Don't worry, we'll get you sorted, young man. It's a bit troublesome, but you have to have an IC. I didn't know your village was so, secluded. We'll just have to teach you everything. He was rather confused, but he guessed getting identity papers would be worth the trouble. It wasn't worth the trouble. Or, well, almost. Shift 5. The next afternoon, they drove to the small police box in the same town Kakashi had bought his clothes. The nearest central police station in Yusutafu City was 3 hours away from the town. You're not an unauthorized immigrant or villain, are you? No, Daichi-san. Told you he's a reliable type. There might be honest, reliable villains that still go around causing chaos. Ha, true. Kakashi closed his eyes and wished he thought of forging an IC beforehand. The police substation in the town was a single-story compound with only 1 or 2 cells, an interrogation room, and 3 people manning it. Mariko-san and Kakashi approached the lone policeman manning the front desk, while Daichi-san acquainted himself with the sofa. How can I help you? The policeman intoned. His name tag read Ito. He lost his IC, dear, and we're hoping you can help him out. Boo, what lies. He didn't know Mariko-san had it in her. Name? The policeman asked dully. Square-rimmed glasses perched at the bridge of his hooked nose. His blue uniform looked fairly tight on him. As a wearer of uniform, Kakashi was so judging him. It wasn't a pudge, no, the Akamichi clan was proof that mass did not correlate to incapability. It was how ill-fitting the uniform was that got to him. Ugh, at least he could have gotten something that fitted. Had Kakashi. The sound of typing filled the room. The policeman wrinkled his nose in disbelief. No such family name. He straightened, his pudge straining against his shirt. He looked at Kakashi proper. Why are there no records of you? Kakashi shrugged. Parents forgot. I got lazy. Never got around to doing so. He squinted at Kakashi. There's no records of your family too. Are you even a citizen? Kinda. The policeman stared dubiously at him. After a few roundabouts of how can you have no icks or records, the policeman muttered impossible and finally stood up. He took a moment to adjust his belt uncomfortably before leaving to make a phone call to someone named Tamakawa. He returned with a distinctively uncertain look. I'm afraid you'll have to follow me to the questioning room. We'll have to ask you a few more questions. Turning to Mariko, he said politely, Ma'am, please take a seat first. We'll need some time to ask him a few questions in private. Oh, okay, she fluttered nervously. The shinobi waved to show he was fine and sauntered after the policeman. The officer brought him to a quarantined room, gave a standard introduction, and thus the interrogation started. Policeman Ito frowned down his spectacles at the laptop. Kakashi waited across the metal table, occasionally staring at the camera and resisting the urge to make rude gestures at it. They had made him push down his mask before entering the interrogation room. Suspecting that he would be searched and detained at the police station, Kakashi had decided to only bring his phone and a few weapons. He could defend himself well enough with Taijutsu and Ninjutsu, but it's better to be safe than sorry. The latter, which included senbons in the seams of his clothes, were hidden with Jinjutsu. Name? His eyes never left the screen as he typed into the laptop slowly at odd intervals. Kakashi rarely used the computer, but he was sure that using just 3 fingers to type was inefficient. Had Kakashi. Quirk? None. Occupation? Kakashi yawned. Even if he told them the truth, they would take his words as utter bullshit. Farmer. Where are you from? Konoha. He typed something into the computer. There were a few seconds of pause as he peered at it. Where's there? It's not in our records. It's a hidden village. All hidden villages are also in our records. We have the hidden Fushun village and the hidden Tokai village, but no Kahona. Wow, there were really hidden village in this universe. He tried to search for them online but it yielded no results. Oh wait, did the policeman just say it's Konoha? Policeman Ito stared blankly at him. Wasn't that what I said? No. Look, he said, half irritated and half discomfited. Under the law, you're currently an unregistered and unauthorized person in Japan. It's best if you don't lie and tell the truth. Kakashi wasn't intimidated, not one bit. He sighed noisily. He wanted the truth, he said. Fine. Konohagakure no Sato is in the land of fire, near the land of wind. It's hidden among the leaves, as the name suggests, relatively near to the Valley of the End. It'll take me around a week, probably a fortnight for you to get there from the hidden rain village. What are you saying? Basically, it's in a different universe. Policeman Ito's frown deepened. Last chance. Where are you from? Let's see, his eyes drifted lazily to the ceiling. I'm technically from the land of fire, but if you trace back my ancestry, it's highly possible that some haddocks originated from the land of lightning. Without another word, Policeman Ito stood up and exited the interrogation room. He came back soon after, with a beanpole of a person trailing after him. The newcomer policeman Sato, his name tag proclaimed, had juniper green eyes. He fidgeted with his earpiece, then, realizing that Kakashi was eyeing him like a wolf to a sheep, folded his hands and puffed up his chest. Kakashi's unimpressed look spoke volumes. Policeman Sato stood slightly off from Policeman Ito at the edge of the table, closer to Kakashi. The shinobi noticed that he was careful to remain in the policeman's peripheral vision. We'll do a test run first, Policeman Ito said as means of introduction. Kakashi felt the hairs at the back of his neck stand. Instantly, his attention honed onto Beanpole. Outwardly, he looked ever the same half-lidded eyes, bored expression. Policeman Sato's eyes were glowing a luminescent green. What was his quirk? An intelligent guess would be mind-reading, but he sensed no external presence trying to breach his mental barriers. Kakashi fortified his mind anyway, slipping into his Anbu mental defense. Unreadable, like an empty white room. Name? Again. Had Kakashi. The Beanpole man made a gesture, but otherwise said nothing. The questioning proceeded. Gender? Male. Same gesture. It was probably a truth quirk instead of a mind-reading quirk. Instantly, he felt relief course through him, then annoyance. Species? Wa dog, he deadpanned. A different gesture was made. Yeep, Sato was definitely a truth seeker. Just great. They thought they would be able to tell if he was lying. The policeman may have a truth quirk, but it had glaring weaknesses that Kakashi noticed and had no qualms with exploiting. After all, what was life without some fun? Policeman Ito narrowed his eyes at him. Species, he repeated. He bared his teeth in a dog-like fashion, showing off his unusually pointed canines. Don't believe me? No? He rolled his eyes. Fine. Hookage, purple dinosaur with green spots, special breed, beta model 6, and ninja registration number 009720. Policeman Sato looked confused. There's some truth in that, he whispered. Kakashi heard him anyway. Yes, there's some truth in that, but it was irrelevant information. Not that they knew that, or even exactly which part was the truth. What? Is your quirk working properly? Policeman Ito whispered back. Beanpole bristled. Yes, he snapped back as softly as he could. Kakashi could still hear them. Internally, he snickered. Never mind, we'll talk later. They turned back to him, clearing their throats awkwardly. Are you a villain? He blinked. No. Even if I were, why would I admit it? Policeman Sato frowned. He did the motion for truth. Gosh, they were so obvious, it hurt to see. Glad to know he was being underestimated. What's your quirk? Lightning quirk. Truth guy surreptitiously made the gesture for negation. Don't lie. Energy manipulation. He didn't have a quirk, per se, but that was the closest it could get anyway. Policeman Sato signed no, then yes, then a mix of both. That was a clear I don't know. Do you even have a quirk? Ma, maybe. I have a toe joint though. Policeman Ito shot him a dirty look. So you don't have a quirk? Kakashi shrugged. Oh, if you say so, he said vaguely. The human lie detector made the same I don't know gesture with a helpless expression. The interrogator pressed his nose bridge tiredly. Okay, next question. Where do you come from? From Konoha. That's in another world. He rolled his eyes. Not this. Unfortunately, Kakashi wasn't done. Staring dead-eyed at the policeman, he leant forward seriously and added, I was summoned from another universe and can't find a way back. The look he received was dismissive. He smiled but said nothing, instead waiting for the truth man's response. A second later, Policeman Sato blanched. He's telling the truth. Oh my god, Ito-san, he's telling the truth. All efforts of preventing Kakashi from hearing him fell apart as the officer's voice rose hysterically towards the end. What? Internally, he smirked, relishing in their palpable confusion. Their sweet huffs of frustration were music to his ears. It was a pity he didn't have either his phone or book. He reckoned this would take a very, very long time. They lasted another 5 minutes before they fled the room. Is Tamikawa-san coming soon? He said he would be here by now. Let's just wait for him. He's, deliberately messing with my quirk. I don't know how, but he is, Policeman Sato swore. His answers are full of nonsense. Policeman Ito exclaimed. Then, in a quieter voice. Do you think he really came from a ninja village? I don't know what to believe anymore. I think he made my quirk act up. What if he lied and I thought it was the truth? I can't tell what's real now. Is my life a lie? He paused, yanking at his hair. I think my life's a lie. He's doing all this on purpose just to spite us, isn't he? I think so too. What an? When Police Assistant Inspector Sansa Tamikawa walked into the holding room, he was met with his two subordinates freaking out, occasionally peering through the glass mirror. The unidentified person with no records was alone in the cell. He had tilted the chair backwards onto two legs and was staring at the ceiling in a very obviously bored manner. Tamikawa knew he had the features of a cat and occasionally walked silently like one, but for the officers to not realize someone had entered was an all-time low. As he approached, he heard Sato questioning his sanity out loud. Did he want to know what was going on? Who was he kidding? He didn't even have a choice. It was part of his job description. He cleared his throat. What's going on here? They jumped in shock. When they realized it was just him, they instantly latched onto him like lost kittens. Tamikawa-san, thank God you're finally here. It took a whole 10 minutes for them to blubber through their story. His cat ears were twitching in annoyance by the end of it. We should probably alert the pro heroes on this, concluded Ito as he pushed up his spectacles. Tamikawa raised an eyebrow. And why? Half the time he's convinced on the things he say, and the other half, my quirk detects not quite lie, even when it's a blatant dinosaur lie. Sato looked close to tears. They teetered a little, doubt planting in their mind. But maybe he's really a dinosaur? Sato asked. They took a moment to consider that. That can't be it, Ito said nervously. Right. Tamikawa smacked both of their heads. Get it together. Sato-san, doesn't your quirk only detect if the person is lying? Mix some truths and lies and you get confused which is which. Seriously, hasn't this happened before? Not in the interrogation room, and not to this level, no, Sato said glumly. Tamikawa gave him a long look of disbelief before continuing. Or maybe this hatted person believes the rubbish she spews. That doesn't make them facts. Just in case, shouldn't we ask a hero with a stronger lie-detecting or mind-reading quirk? Maybe Xer. She's been posted to Spain for an indefinite period of time. They groaned. There's also the possibility, Tamikawa said slowly, that he has a quirk that counters Sato's. Have you considered that? Oh? No. Seriously. What have you two been doing? They gave a nervous chuckle, but otherwise said nothing. Tamakawa exhaled tiredly, pressing the bridge of his nose to ward off his growing headache. Then that means... Yeah, I'll have to call in the next best alternative. We'll need his insights too. He spun his pen in one hand. Get Eraserhead on the line. Hey, wasn't there that cult that claimed they have summoned a demon? It was a gray-haired masked man that apprehended them, right? Yeah, so? Tamakawa smacked Ito's head with his clipboard. You idiot, Haddock has gray hair. He was wearing a mask too, wasn't he? Check the records, I'm sure it's him. Interrogate the villains, maybe they know something. Oh my gosh, I didn't think of that. I'm surrounded by idiots, Tamakawa muttered. Ito made to leave, hesitated, then turned around again. But the villains are held at the Nishi police station. Their inspector waved them off in annoyance. I'll interview them myself. Then, he swerved in his chair to scowl fiercely at Ito. I'll bring Haddock down too, alright. Tamakawa-sama, Sato said in all seriousness from behind, you're a godsend. He buried his face in his hands. Just get out. They fled. Shift 6. Shiketa, the co-leader of the black summoning cult, sat in his pathetic jail as he plotted his grand escape. Soon, he would escape, then break out his sister and fellow followers as well. The high security in Nishi police station, the nearest central police station in Musatafu, was but a measly hindrance to him. It was too meager to suppress his obviously superior prowess. He was just biding his time. Had been, for the past month. Because. Dinner had just ended, which meant that the best time to escape was soon. Everyone would be in the state of food coma, so no one would be prepared to feast now. The door swung opened, thwarting his plans. But he was so close. The guards escorted him into an interrogation room. What did they want from him now? He wasn't scared, and no, he was just curious. The policeman with the cat face was already waiting. Yellow pupils with slitted eyes stared sharply at him from among the brown fur. Triangular cat ears sat at the top of his head, twitching ever so often. Good evening, Shiketa-san, he said. I'd like to ask a few questions about your supposedly summoned being. Shiketa jutted out his chin defensively. I won't tell you anything. The demon we've unleashed will rain lightning and thunder down on your heads as revenge for keeping us captive. He spat and raved. And you'll say that, sighed the policeman, unperturbed. He wasn't scared. Why wasn't he scared? So I brought a guess. He turned around and called out, if you'll please come in, Haddock-san. The door creaked open ominously. Shiketa trembled. Slowly, a foot appeared at the doorway. Then another. His horror mounted. The being took another step out of the shadow. And into the room. The demon grinned, hair bleached and unnatural bone white. His eyes were pits of darkness that devoured the souls of 1,000 pitiful victims, the glint in them like claws ready to maul him into pieces. Yo, he said cheerily, making a peace sign and cocking his head. Did you miss me? Shiketa screamed. I'll tell you everything. Please don't let that demon eat me. He begged. Sure, Tamakawa purred as Haddock was escorted out again. He grinned widely, like a satisfied cat with its prey. Thank you for your cooperation. The Nishi police station was bustling with activity, despite it only being 9 in the morning. Eraserhead strode down the corridor, with Sir Night-Eye and a red-headed teenager just one step behind him. Tamakawa met him right outside the investigation room. Eraserhead, Sir Night-Eye, he nodded, it's good to see you again. The sides of Eraserhead's lips tugged upwards. It was not the first time he had worked together with the assistant inspector, although most would not have expected the underground pro-hero to be well acquainted with a police officer, especially one that was not based in the Musatafu police headquarters. Sansa Tamakawa had no qualms in reaching out to pro-heroes for assistance, and his supervisors apparently trusted him enough with tricky cases. Also, the fact that he was one of the more capable police officers on rotation throughout the police stations and Kanban around Musatafu also played a part. Personally, he liked that Tamakawa was a reliable and fast worker who could stand firm even in the presence of pro-heroes. No gushing, eager to please police officers, please. Eraserhead motioned to the teenager. My student, Ash Mystic. I hope you don't mind me bringing her and Sir Night-Eye along, Tamakawa. Not at all. Thanks for coming, he said. Sorry for the short notice. I just received the case 2 days ago, but thought it was best to ask for assistance as soon as possible. As briefly covered over the phone yesterday, the detainee is an anomaly. Sir Night-Eye cocked his head in a bird-like manner, his atypical scowl on his face. Tamakawa felt obliged to elaborate. He has no records, neither personal fingerprint doesn't even register in the database or even family records, not even from the international database. How can that be? Even citizens from the hidden villages have records, Night-Eye mused. He claims to be from another universe, summoned by some villains. The assistant inspector grimaced. Worst thing is that in a case a few months back, villains swore they summoned a demon him, supposedly for their heinous world domination plan. His subsequent appearance seemed too close to be a coincidence. Let me guess, Eraserhead said dryly, their utterly heinous, extremely ingenious plan backfired. Their demon was the one who turned them into the police, he admitted. Ash Mystic looked surprised. Can we view the interview recordings first? Night Eye asked. With a nod, Tamakawa let them in. Tamakawa gave them another brief run-through as he loaded the recordings. The pro-heroes studied the picture of the detainee with a critical eye. His gray hair fell haphazardly over his face, almost reaching those heavy-lidded eyes. There were wrinkles and laugh lines on his face, alongside a beauty mark near his mouth. He had distinctive sharp canine teeth that resembled a dog's. When he smiled, the pointed edges peeked out from under his upper lip. With a defined jawline and sharp features, Kakashi was what many would consider handsome. He wore a pair of jeans and a fitting button-down black shirt that hinted at a toned body. Underneath his shirt was another skin-tight material that was pulled around his neck. According to descriptions, it usually served as a mask that reached up to his nose bridge. He slouched even when standing, and had a perpetually nonchalant expression. However, there was carefully hidden cunning behind those half-lidded eyes. His movements, seemingly languid, were balanced and deliberate. It would hardly take any effort for his current posture to transition smoothly to one suited for fighting. Eraser had recognized it immediately. "Ha," Night Eye remarked, "he stands like you." The teacher glared at the smirking pro-hero. Tamakawa played the video, and their attention refocused back onto Haddock. He figured out Sato's quirk in after he spoke 2 sentences. Tamakawa started. "How do you know that?" Night Eye paused and rewind, freezing the video and zooming into Haddock's reaction when Sato walked in. Look at his face. It's very carefully blank, as if he was expecting something along the lines of a mind reader or lie detector. Then, he fast-forwarded a little, he relaxed just a little after Sato gestured. Tamakawa squinted at the screen. "He looks the same," he complained. The pro-heroes gave him pitying looks. His head tilted just slightly, offered Eraserhead. Ash Mystic looked equally befuddled, so Tamakawa felt less like an idiot. "Anyway, I mean to point out that he seems to be experienced with interrogations." Night Eye paused. "And telepaths." After figuring out Sato's quirk and figuring out their hand signals, probably in barely half a minute, you can see that he became a lot more amused by the duo. "How do you know he figured out their signals?" Eraser had turned apologetically to the police officer. "You subordinates are the opposite of subtle. It's no surprise if he figures out their signals." Tamakawa sighed. "You figured it out immediately too, didn't you?" The pro-hero very politely did not reply. Night Eye gave a low chuckle as he watched video Sato flounder, and made a helpless "I don't know" gesture. "He's playing with them." Tamakawa smacked his face and groaned. "They're making it way too easy." "Can't say their reactions aren't funny," grunted Eraserhead. Night Eye gave another approving chuckle. The red-haired student shot her teacher a bewildered look, and received an eyebrow raised in amusement. The assistant inspector sulked. "I'm not sure why you're deriving satisfaction from this when he's making our lives harder. You just gotta appreciate his humor. Doesn't seem villainous or demonic, besides having a bad sense of humor." "I like his sense of humor." "You have bad taste, Night Eye." "His accent," muttered Night Eye. "Do you recognize it?" Eraserhead frowned. "No." After coming into contact with so many dialects and accents, Night Eye had made it a point to familiarize himself with as many as he could. Eraserhead, on the other hand, picked it up from all the underground fightings. However, both did not recognize the lower, harsher tones that Haddock used. His speech pattern sounds old, like from poems and stuff, Ash Mystic, as always red-haired student, piped up. "Old Japanese literature's language structure," suggested Tamakawa. Night Eye made a sound of agreement. "If he says he comes from a village of ninjas, which is roughly from the feudal eras, then his accent supports it." "Time travel?" Night Eye paused to think about it. "It's possible," he said carefully, "and that certainly explains his toe joint." Yet he also mentioned the possibility of having a quirk, Eraserhead pointed out. "Yeah. Wonder what's that about, Sato and Ito are way out of their depths when they faced him." "I know," grimaced Tamakawa. "They're usually reliable and effective when carrying out other duties, but they're not suited for this type of police work." "It's a good thing you called us," Night Eye said. "He's interesting, to say the least." Eraserhead stood up, stretching. "Alright, how about viewing the villain's recounts? How many people are on this case?" "Just me. The superintendent and higher-ups are trying to keep this as low profile as possible, which is also why only I'm handling it. Sato and Ito knows something's up, but they don't know the details." Eraserhead hummed in agreement. "Keep it that way. Wouldn't want to cause undue panic." "Of course." Eraserhead thumbed the profile of the leader of the cult pensively. "The quirk that can transport objects through different universes," he said. "Didn't know a human being was an object. That's why Takeshi needed a blood sacrifice and a whole demonic summoning ritual," Night Eye pointed out. "Myths have truth in them. It happens that such methods do enhance his quirk." The hero paused as the statement sank in, then shook his head incredulously. "Oh my god," he muttered. "Can you believe he was actually summoned like a demon? Pentagon, candles, all that." Eraserhead grunted wordlessly. He didn't have enough coffee for this. Night Eye whistled. "Wow. It's like the cosmos's greatest joke. Whatever did Haddock do in his life to deserve this? We can ask him. Ash Mystic dutifully wrote the question down. He took them out in less than 5 minutes. How? We've already established that he has some power, right? The question is, what is it? Perhaps Shiketa exaggerated. It's possible, but he still took out 7 people with relative ease, even when disoriented and in a foreign setting. Yeah. Night Eye laced his fingers together, face casted in shadows. Don't underestimate him, he's dangerous. Oh yeah, I brought Haddock down to see the cult members yesterday. Oh? What was their reactions? Tamakawa snorted. Absolutely priceless. Night Eye tossed the file into the table and glared at it. So we know that he's not a villain, has unknown powers, is potentially formidable, and probably comes from a different universe. What else do we know? His purpose, his alignment. He worked for the Fujiokas for a month as a Tamakawa blinked, paused, then squinted to make sure he was reading the correct thing. Farmer. What? Farmer. He was a farmer. Night Eye looked suitably confused. Why? Tamakawa shrugged. Eraserhead sighed and motioned his student to record it. One more thing to ask him, then. Have you checked his phone's internet history? Yeah. The policeman ticked each item off his fingers as he listed them. He watches some porn and reads. Erotica, articles on heroes and hidden villages. Erotica, articles on people with dimension-traveling quirks. And oh, more erotica. He slid the list of sites onto the table. Eraserhead blinked at it. That's a lot of porn. Technically, it's highly rated adult romance books. But anyway, look. He searched for Konoha before. Didn't you mention that in the interview? They replayed that part. Eraserhead leant back. Taking into account that Sato didn't call foul, he's telling the whole truth. But Eraserhead, Ash Mystic said hesitantly, didn't Sato-san report that his quirk was messed up? Night Eye shook his head. Technically true, but not quite. Had to confuse Sato with truths and lies, which would send Sato a mixed signal. However, when Haddock tells a blatant lie or whole truth, Sato can detect it. But that's all Sato's quirk can do. He can't rely on his quirk to sieve out the useful information from the irrelevant nonsense meant to deflect the questions. That's why it's limited, actually. The police officer narrowed his eyes. So if what he says about Konoha is true, that means that most of what he said in the first interview is most probably true, finished Night Eye. And that's the beauty of, isn't it? Deceiving by telling the truth. He wore a shit-eating grin. Eraserhead raised a finger. Logical ruse, he said simply, and his student groaned. Have there been other cases of interdimensional traveling before? Eraserhead abruptly asked. They pondered about that, then proceeded to spend the next hour researching on past records and files. Ash Mystic stuck to the internet since she wasn't technically authorized to view the police records. It was more difficult than expected to sift for relevant and reliable information, or even garner information at all. There was a time traveler, Tamakawa said an hour later. What happened to him? He died. They fell into a stunned silence. Moving on, Eraserhead said as if Tamakawa had not said anything else. The sound of typing filled the room before Ash Mystic said, there was an alien from another dimension 50 years ago. An intergalactical and interdimensional traveler. Wow. She was carted off into the government's secret labs and never seen again, she said uneasily. The room fell silent again. That's great, Tamakawa said weakly. Night Eye snorted as he pulled out a bunch of records from the database. I've no idea how you have gathered such weird results, but I found a compiled list, sorted by year, of the recorded cases of dimension hopping. They crowded around his computer as he displayed the neat rows of case names and brief descriptions. There were almost 20 cases recorded in the span of 2 centuries from all over the world. Most were highly classified information that were locked, with nothing more given besides the name and the year. You're amazing, Tamakawa breathed. As expected from a super office worker, Eraserhead whispered such that only Night Eye heard it. He kicked the younger hero viciously under the table. Eraserhead flinched. Haddock isn't the first person to experience interdimensional traveling due to a quirk, but he was the first supposedly ninja to have done so, he elaborated. What happened to the rest? Sent back by the ones who brought them here, which is extremely rare, and we don't know how many or who possess a similar quirk or assimilated into the societies. Or, in some cases, they mysteriously disappeared. As if the last part wasn't ominous at all. Wow, the last recorded case was 20 years ago in Belgium. Eraserhead browsed through the descriptions. All came from a parallel world, or somewhere with quirks, except for that one alien. Haddock's still an anomaly. What about time travelers? That's more complicated, but I doubt it. Time quirks and dimension quirks are entirely separate, so even if he came from a parallel universe of our ancient past, the timeline's still different. It doesn't change anything. He's still from a different dimension. Tamakawa groaned. So now we have more evidence that Haddock is highly possibly from another universe. That's great. At least we know that if he is cooperative, he can be assimilated into the society with little complications, Eraserhead pointed out. Tamakawa groaned again. Do you want a possible ninja running around wild and free among the civilians, unsupervised? The police officer demanded. The pro hero grimaced. Yeah. That's what I thought too. Tamakawa checked his watch, then made a sound of surprise. They had spent the whole day researching and just bouncing ideas off over and over. It's already 7. Shall we call it a day? They nodded. We'll see you tomorrow at 9, Ben. The second day was spent reviewing the case materials again, making sure they left no information out as they compiled a comprehensive list of questions. It was 11 in the afternoon by the time they confirmed that all their bases had been covered. Great. So we know that he's not a dog, he's male, he's not a villain, but worse, he's an unpredictable variable from another universe. He may be a ninja. Do you think that's his actual ninja registration number? From a hidden ninja village called Konoha. He may have a strong power similar to a quirk that is related to energy manipulation, and not limited to lightning, and that he's currently a farmer. Tamakawa rattled off in one breath, then inhaled deeply. Anything else? We know the relative location of Konoha. The assistant inspector made a face. Anything else related to Haddock? He likes porn, but the kind that's sort of sappy. He shot Night-Eye a mildly irritated look. Anything else about Haddock that's worthy of taking note? Has trickster tendencies, but possibly also possess some variant of morals, seeing as how he turned the villains in, then went on and become a farmer. Farmer? Eraserhead nodded seriously. Farming is good character building. Tamakawa adopted a stupefied expression. How's that notable? He quirked an eyebrow. We may need to predict his personality, he said solemnly. The policeman shook his head and reached for his pen. Okay, he said after adding that in. Anything else of actual value? He may be a hokage, whatever that means. Maybe it's a subspecies or an occupation. Eraserhead mused. And that is important. Not really. They fell silent. Actually, we know close to nothing to him, besides all these irrelevant facts. However, Eraserhead picked up a flimsy sheet of paper and shook it. It flapped noisily, filling the silence of the room. We do have a long list of questions and theories now. Tamakawa very almost slammed his pen down. Instead, he reached for his cup of black coffee and chugged it down in one go. He checked his watch. It was already 12. Haddock's lunch should be over by now. He stood up abruptly. Shall we visit our esteemed guests now, Ben? Eraserhead looked over his shoulders at his student. Ready? Ash Mystic nodded, flexing her fingers, a determined expression crossing over her petite features. The teacher turned back to the police officer. Lead the way, Tamakawa-san. Kakashi was bored out of his wits. After the Sato and Ito interrogation, an assistant inspector Tamakawa Sansa had transferred him to the Nishi police station in the west ward of Musatafu City at night. The next 2 days consisted of waiting aimlessly in detention. The only fun he had was seeing the cultists on the first day, and that only lasted 10 minutes collectively. Phew. It was currently his 3rd day in the police cell at Nishi police station, and if there was no entertainment by the end of the day, he was going to find some himself. Maybe stage an escape, or mess with the guards. Convince them to give him some reading material. Steal their keys. Do something. The police officers had reassured the Fujiokas that it was a customary check and not a cause of concern. He would probably be back in a week, they had said. He thought he could also be dead in a week for all the Fujiokas knew. At this rate, he would probably die from having nothing to do. He needn't have worried. After an early lunch at 11, he was brought into another interrogation room. The door opened and Assistant Inspector Tamakawa walked in. The first time they had met, Kakashi stared at the cabman for longer than what was socially acceptable, but the assistant inspector was very nice about it. A human being with an animal head still took some getting used to though. And he thought Hoshigaki kissing was weird. At least this Tamakawa was polite and respectful. The man with bloodshot eyes, together with a teenage girl, followed after the assistant inspector. The man had messy, unkempt hair that fell to his shoulders, resembling a mop. A really long, gray scarf wrapped around his neck. Kakashi wondered at its practicality. Perhaps it served a dual function. His suit was entirely black but not exceptionally odd. Besides looking like an overworked, sleep-deprived young man, the newcomer was nondescript and unremarkable. The girl, on the other hand, was undeniably in a hero costume. She was young. If he were to guess, he would say she was roughly 18 years of age. Her hair was fiery red, straight and mid-back length. She wore a skin-tight white and brown suit, coupled with arm guards and white belt. An auburn cloak with its hood down was clasped around her neck, falling to her knees. By association, he would warrant that the older man was a hero as well, perhaps her tutor. Hello, Kakashi purred. Nice to see you again, Assistant Inspector. Haddock-san. Have you been well taken care of? Brilliant. A pity I have nothing to do. He sighed exaggeratedly. To what do I owe you and you guests this pleasure? We'd like to ask you a few questions pertaining your circumstances, Haddock-san. I prefer dogs, he said abruptly, as if that answered everything. The assistant inspector closed his eyes and counted to 10. The man tapped his shoulder, signaling he would take it from there. Tamakawa took it as his cue to leave. The stranger sat down opposite of Kakashi, while the girl stood hovering slightly behind him. Haddock-san, I'm Eraserhead, a pro hero of Misatafu City, and this is Ash Mystic. We're here to ask you a few questions. You should be aware of your position currently. Cooperation would be your best choice, he said blandly. He could feel the man's gaze weighing on him. Oh? A hero? Kakashi's eyes smiled, lacing his fingers together and resting his chin on them. Nice to meet you, Hiro-san. I've been wanting to meet one of you for a while now. Wow, Sir Knight, I muttered, frowning. He's a lot more intense than before. He also noted that Haddock's speech was accented, but comprehensible. For a supposedly ninja from a different universe which was bound to have different variations of languages, he picked up on changes fast. A lot more irritating, too, Tamikawa grumbled. Eraserhead's eyes sharpened. Is that so? What for? To go home, of course. Haddock tilted his head, tone silky. Surely you know I'm from another universe. Or have I overestimated your abilities? He did not rise to the bait. We'll be the judge of that. Now, we'll like to conduct a quirk-induced interrogation under the law. Do you know what that entails, Haddock-san? The detainee hummed. An explanation won't be amiss. With your consent, a truth quirk will be used on you. We'll be sticking strictly to the questions related to the case, and you'll still be conscious of your response. While this is not obligatory at this point in time, it will greatly speed up the process. As long as you don't have anything to hide, you have nothing to worry about. Eraserhead sifted through the papers he had in hand, then placed one in front of Haddock. Do we have your consent? Haddock looked at him through hooded eyes. Tell me more about the truth quirk first. The pro hero beckoned his student forward. Ash Mystic's quirk compels pure honesty in everything you utter for 2 hours. She will also be simultaneously skimming your surface thoughts to ensure your words match your intent. Upon seeing Haddock frown, he clarified, she can't delve deeper than that. Even if, by happenstance, she found out anything personal, unless it's against the law, she's law-bounded to keep silent about it. The man surveyed the red-haired girl. You're an intern, he said. She bristled, placing both hands on her hip. You doubt my skills, mister. She challenged, hair swishing behind her and a daring glint in her eyes. Ah, she had a temper, Kakashi could feel it. The posture was reminiscent to a certain red-hot habanero an age ago. Idly, he wondered if her hair could stand as well, then dismissed that ridiculous notion. He thought of his own students, young but formidable in their own right, then chuckled softly. Picking up the pen, he signed his consent quickly. Ma, funnily enough, I don't. He narrowed his eyes at her. But a word of caution. For both of our sakes, don't look too deeply into my thoughts. His aura rested heavily in the room. All of a sudden, she struggled to breathe. The intensity of his presence was suffocating, bearing down on her ruthlessly and almost making her knees buckle. She barely resisted. Instinctively, Eraserhead shot up into a defensive stance in front of his student, quirk activated, but the man's stifling presence remained. Haddock didn't even deign the pro-hero a glance, looking past him, eyes still locked with his students. She eyed the dark look in his eyes and swallowed her bubbling fear. Of course, she finally whispered hoarsely. He looked away, and the oppressive atmosphere completely disappeared. Haddock had done something, but Eraserhead didn't know what it was. He was wary, but the interrogation had to carry on. The faster the truth quirk was in effect, the better. Reluctantly, he sat back down. Anytime you feel that your privacy is being invaded, mention it and we'll determine the necessity of the question with regards to the case. You're also allowed to hire an attorney to screen through the recording of this interview, should there be a need for it. Any other questions before we officially commence? How can I trust your words during the interview? Haddock asked. The pro-hero stared evenly back. The muffled voice of Night Eye sizzled through the wireless headset. He's goading you. Shut him down. Don't even consider it, Eraserhead. Do you have anything to hide? He parried mockingly. A few 10 seconds later, Eraserhead reached for a pen. Damn it, Eraser. Ignoring the curses filtering through the earpiece, he wrote on a piece of paper and lifted it up for all to see. I, Eraserhead, hereby give permission for Ash Mystic to use her quirk on me for this interview, on my authority as pro-hero of Misatafu. His student faltered for a moment. Are you Sue? Yes, he cut her off, all the while not breaking eye contact with the unblinking man in front of him. Proceed, Ash Mystic. Haddock was still leaning on one palm. He smiled, looking pleasantly surprised. Interesting, he cooed. I think I like you already. Much as it would be fun to toy with them, Kakashi ultimately chose to cooperate. He really didn't want to end up being hunted across the country or detained for longer than necessary. Peace and freedom and all that. He wanted them to find out about him. He wanted to incite curiosity. He wanted to spur them to help him. The heroes would naturally try to find solutions to send him back, since he was an anomaly in this universe, and maintaining the status quo was one of the jobs of law enforcers. He wanted their trust. He needed their trust since he wished to seek assistance from them. The heroes came to him, saving him the trouble of finding the more sourcing for dimension-hopping quirks. The heroes came to him, so he would save them the extra trouble by answering their questions. He had questions too, and by answering theirs, he knew would get his. He would trust them, especially after Eraserhead took the leap to trust him. Trust, after all, went both ways. Ash Mystic cupped her hands together with a look of immense concentration. A moment later, her hands opened to show a small pile of ash. Then, slowly making her way to Kakashi, she carefully blew some of it into his face. It took all of Kakashi's willpower not to react to the powder. He blinked, some of the dust having caught in his eye. The rest settled into his skin, sinking in and dissipating as if it had never existed. He felt a whisper brush past his mind, and instantly, his Anbu defenses went up. The red-haired girl visibly flinched. "Ease up a little, will you?" He listened minutely, worry. The presence hovering at the edge of his mind prodded his thoughts gently, then retreated to a safe distance. Kakashi regarded the girl in surprise. She did keep her word on skimming the bare minimum of his thoughts. The same process was repeated with the Eraserhead. After a mental connection was established with both, she nodded. "Okay. You require the laws to be reread, Haddock-san." He didn't. "Alright. We'll start with a control question. Where are we?" The words slid from Kakashi's tongue smoothly without conscious thought. "Police station." He was taken by surprise despite knowing the theory behind it. "Okay. What's your name?" He resorted to not reply, and surprisingly, it didn't force him to. On the other hand, the moment he tried to say something other than the truth, for example Sukiya, had Kakashi, it didn't work. Despite himself, a low chortle escaped his lips. "You have an impressive quirk, Heron." She blushed. "Next question," Eraserhead continued. "Where are you from?" He let the words flow. "Konohagakure no Sato. I believe it's in a different universe from here. Are you an established pro-hero?" "I didn't agree to play 20 questions with you, Haddock-san. But yes, I am." "Tell me more about the village and your occupation." "It's a ninja village, but we have civilians as well. I'm a shinobi." He stopped there, unwilling to go into more details. Kakashi tried to keep his mind blank. Unfortunately, images of him dying of paperwork, then of Naruto taking up his mantle, flitted through his mind. Ash Mystic's eyes widened. "You were the village leader." He winced, cursing internally. Drat, he was hoping she didn't pick up on that. "Ah, yes, I'm the Hokage." Eraserhead appraised him in a different light. "Were you the most powerful shinobi?" "Not sure how that's important, but no, I'm not." Haddock grinned wryly. "Do you know anyone with the court to send me back?" Eraserhead took a moment to think. "For now, no, but we will look into it. Please recount how you came into this world." For the first time since stepping foot into the world, he told his side of the story truthfully. "Tallies with the villains," Night Eye muttered through the earpiece. "How did he do it though? What did you use to take out the villains? Why did you subdue them?" Kakashi scratched the side of his nose. "Use my skills. They weren't hard to subdue." His smile was all teeth, sharp and wolfish. "And they annoyed me, dragged me into a new environment, and expected me to heal at their beck and call. Why shouldn't I turn them in?" He cocked his head to one side. "What's the most probable fate I would face? If things go smoothly, you'll be free to go in a few days. We'll look into a way to transport you back home in the meantime. You won't be detained." Eraserhead narrowed his eyes at him, "unless you pose a threat to the society." "I don't harm innocents for the fun of it, nor did I come searching for trouble," Kakashi said innocently, holding both hands up in a mock gesture of surrender. He didn't come into this world looking for trouble, but he made no promises of trouble seeking in the future. "I'm law-abiding. He just happened to find loopholes in the rules, or bend them without outright breaking them. I come in peace." The pro-hero could find no fault in his declarations. He was contemplative as he made a mark on his questionnaire. "Back to the cultists. You could have had your revenge on them. Why didn't you?" Kakashi actually thought about it for a little while. His mind flashing to the Uchiha's curse of hatred and his lovely, revenge-obsessed student. "Bah. Revenge. That's pointless," he said, tone old and heavy. "The fate of those who seek revenge is grim. You end up suffering even more." He held Eraserhead's gaze for a second before adding, "Plus, they might have answers I require in the future." His grin turned cheeky. "Watching them squirm is also a lot more fun." Over the headset, Night Eye snorted. "Do you have any intentions of working with any villains, now or in the future?" "No. Let's just say that those who hurt innocents and civilians are detestable." Haddock's eyes gained a strange, sadistic glint. "They're scums. That's answer enough, no. What's your quirk?" Eraserhead shot him an irritated look. "Not telling." "State your current intentions." Haddock spread his arms wide innocently. "Be a farmer. Live up to my name. Have a peaceful life. Find a way back." "Is your quirk perhaps specialized in capture and interrogation?" He ignored the question, instead leaning forward. "Don't you have any ambitions? Desire for power?" The room temperature dropped. He scoffed, hardly intimidated. "Ma, too much work. I'm retired. Why would I want power? The pursuit of power brings madness. It's empty." There was barely a pause before he asked his question. "What's the biggest threat in this world?" The pro-hero held his gaze a little more before his lips twisted into a half-smile. "For a ninja, you're very peaceful. And I've already said I'm not playing 20 questions with you, Haddock-san. He waved his hand lazily. It comes with age. Also, you know fun, Hiro-san. Eraser had pondered over that. How old are you? He asked suddenly. He started at the non sequitur. A huff of laughter escaped his lips. I'm 45. Whatever did you do to deserve this? Eraser had muttered under his breath as he flipped through the papers. The cosmos must hate you. Kakashi heard it anyway. They do, he said, propping his chin onto his hand and sighing dramatically. The hero's lips twitched upwards. Why do you wear a mask? Haddock looked away. I have a very sensitive sense of smell, he said in a deliberately neutral tone. Eraser had shot a questioning glance at Ash Mystic. She hesitated. Although he spoke the truth, she sensed other reasons behind his choice. However, there was a dull throb of anguish surrounding the slew of other reasons. It was personal. She made her decision. She nodded. He moved on. What did you do just now to create the depressive atmosphere? Ah, Haddock said lightly, tapping his chin with one finger. We call it killing intent. His eyes crinkled upwards. His smile was plastic. Ash Mystic flinched, remembering the fear that had grappled her. Kakashi's expression softened. He sent an apologetic pulse through their temporary mental connection. Sorry. Killing intent. Eraserhead's voice was flat. His fist clenched. It's a way of inciting fear by projecting your killing intention. One that is strong enough can freeze your enemies, even overpower them. Eraserhead glared at the shinobi. There was a tint of red in the hero's eyes as he straightened intimidatingly. Don't you ever do that on my students again, or I swear, Haddock Kakashi, I will make you regret it. The shinobi appraised the furious pro-hero again. Kakashi wagered that the hero didn't realize he was asserting his own watered-down version of killing intent. A protective teacher, So he was right and they were a teacher-student pair. The hero had let slip more than he meant to. I'll try not to, he finally said. He could relate, really. Eraserhead was someone who had precious people under his care to protect as well, and was willing to challenge an unknown powerful person for them. He respected that. The tension lining Eraserhead's expression lessened, and they moved on. Alright, last question. You've been skirting this for a while now. Eraserhead leant his elbows onto the table. We've established that you don't have a quirk. Then, what's your powers and skills? Kakashi sighed. There was no way out of it this time. It's called chakra. Chakra? As in, Indian religions, chakra meditation, and yoga. He floundered for a moment. I'm unfamiliar with that concept, he admitted. Perhaps we're referring to different chakras. In my universe, it's gifted by the Sage of Six Paths. I'll skip the details. Anyway, I can manipulate it and use it for different jutsus. As for my skill set, my specialties are ninjutsu and taijutsu. Of course, he was also well versed in jinjutsu, genjutsu and bukijutsu, but they didn't need to know that. The hero lifted an eyebrow. Elaborate. Jutsus are ninja arts. They're probably equivalent to spells here. Kakashi cringed visibly at that analogy. Ninjutsu is, very vague, actually. It's anything that's not taijutsu or jinjutsu, mostly requiring hand signs and chakra. Taijutsu can be simplified to hand-to-hand combat, while jinjutsu is the art of casting illusions. Specifically, what can you do with chakra? The list is inexhaustible. Fireballs, elemental jutsus, body cloning, body flicker technique, shadow manipulation, healing techniques, sealing, illusions, it goes on. Eraserhead very deliberately kept his posture neutral. It sounded very versatile and extremely dangerous. To be able to wreak damage easily, to move quickly and manipulate as much elements as they could, it was like an amalgamation of quirks, combined into one body. At least quirks were localized, specific. It seemed like a single person could do everything, as long as their skills were there. Should such techniques land into the wrong hands, is it something that can be learned? Kakashi read the worry lining his face and understood immediately. No, you need active chakra coils to do what I can. As far as I can tell, or what Fujioka Mariko had seen, but he wasn't about to implicate her. None of the citizens of this universe have that. Their relief were palpable. What about weapons? Shurikens, swords. He raised an eyebrow. What do you think? Eraserhead exhaled. Just answer the question. Smirking, he tossed a kunai onto the ceiling in an action too fast to follow. Almost instantaneously, the pro-hero had his capture gear wrapped around Kakashi, hair floating upwards and eyes red, but it was still a beat too slow. The shinobi prodded at the capture gear, restraining him, unfazed. Yeah, kunai and shuriken are our bread and butter. I thought you've checked him for weapons. Night, I asked Tamakawa accusingly, expression fierce and shadowed. We did. I don't know how he managed to sneak that in, even past the metal detector, protested the assistant inspector. The hero massaged his temple, his glare somehow deepening. At least we can ascertain that we have his cooperation all along. We can charge you for that, Eraserhead growled. How did you get that past the metal detector? His eye smile lose fakeness. Jinjutsu. Misdirection. Eraserhead slammed his palms onto the table. Haddock remained unperturbed. This is not a joke, Haddock Kakashi-san. Remove any other weapons you currently have with you. Haddock tilted his head like a curious cat. Ma, I wouldn't hurt any of you. I wouldn't have been humoring you all along had I wanted to attack. Tugging at the capture gear, he eyed Eraserhead's hair speculatively. Your hair is floating. Is that normal? And here Kakashi was thinking that floating hair was a ridiculous notion. I'm serious, Haddock. Remove the weapons. He smiled, but kept silent. Eraserhead crossed his arms and leant back. Is that so? Haddock-san, this is your last chance. Should you continue to be uncooperative, you will be charged with unlawful possession of weapons, lying to police officers, the unlicensed use of quirks on the police officers, as well as the attempt to attack. The jail time will be more than a year, and after you're done, the authorities and heroes won't take kindly to you, Dimension Traveler or not. Need I continue? Haddock looked up at him through his lashes. But I can't move because of your capture gear, Hiro-san, he said glibly, blinking in an imitation of innocence, wriggling seemingly futilely against the scarf. The capture gear remained wrapped tightly around him, barely giving him movement space. The pro-hero didn't doubt that Haddock had allowed him the semblance of control. The hero cocked his eyebrow up in disbelief. A few minutes later, Haddock sighed. Somehow maneuvering around the capture gear, 3 kunai and 2 senbons thudded onto the table. That's all. Eraserhead prodded at them. Haddock shrugged. The hero held his gaze for a minute before he decided to let it go for now. Don't do that again. He motioned at the observation glass, and Tamakawa entered to remove the weapons from the room. The interrogator and the subject were silent in a staring match. A few minutes later, Eraserhead looked away. We will require a demonstration of your abilities with chakra, Haddock-san. Where and when are you able to demonstrate it safely? Ah, must I? He almost whined. Yes. Would you require a large amount of open space? He hummed thoughtfully. No, actually. Here and now will suffice. Here? Without hurting anyone or trying to escape. Eraserhead narrowed his eyes at him. Do we have your full cooperation? No escaping, no injuring, no deaths. No tricks. You have my word. He hesitated. However, I'll request this to go off record, Hiro-san. Why? His tone was sharp. I don't want anyone to find out the extent of what I can do. There's no telling what they would do with the information. Kakashi grimaced. Top security means nothing to a determined person. You really wouldn't want this on record. He would know, internal security leaks in Konoha always drove him crazy. I don't want to be a tool for anyone. The room was silent. Very well, he said, then tapped on his headset. You heard him. Switch off the recording. I must have agreed with him since all he received was a done-in response. Alright, Haddock said, somehow managing to place both hands together despite the capture gear constraining his movements. Watch. In a puff, he disappeared and reappeared on the table. In his place was a pen that clattered onto the floor, along with the capture gear. He charged Rakiri in his hand, the sound of 1,000 birds chirping filling the room. Eraserhead shot up in alarm, his chair toppling over noisily. Ash Misa lurched backwards, gasping. Equally quickly, Kakashi dispersed the lightning cutter before it reached lethal levels. Not that he could use it effectively without the Sharingan, anyway. He wasn't done. His fingers moved rapidly into motions too fast for the heroes to follow. He casted a Jinjutsu, weaving an image of a place he yearned, somewhere in another universe. The grass was soft beneath their feet, some scorched and trampled, the wind chilly, rustling the great trees of Konoha. Sounds of shinobi training and Genin team's laughter filled the training field. Eraserhead shifted into a fighting stance, eyes wide. He swerved, taking in the cliff carved with many faces in the distance, and the few shinobi passing by. What is this, an illusion? Everything felt so real, despite his logic insisting it could not be. His senses were reporting sights and scents he should not be receiving. It took him a few moments to register his earpiece crackling noisily, an incongruous presence unaccounted for. Need, Aizawa, answer me. What's going on? What are you seeing? I'm going in there. The illusion faded off, leaving the pro-hero staring at nothing. His student blinked in confusion, touching the wall as if to check if it was real. Eraserhead took a moment to regain his composure before speaking into his headset. It's fine, he replied, voice sounding slightly off even to his ears as alarm rose in him. Where was Haddock? The shinobi in question was standing on the ceiling behind him. He regarded the gaping pro-hero passively, hands in pocket, motionless. Do you require a more thorough demonstration? Eraserhead activated his quirk. Haddock remained upside down. Under the illusion, he had been at his mercy, yet Haddock did not try anything, as he had promised. For the first time in a long while, Aizawa Shota fell completely out of his depths. Haddock let out a bark of laughter. Your quirk, it's nullifying other quirks, isn't it? He sounded amused and pleased at having figured it out. The pro-hero's eyes turned back to black. Yeah, he said, his lips tugging upwards despite himself, and you don't have a quirk, so it doesn't work, does it? He hopped down nimbly, hands still in his pockets. His eyes crinkled happily. Nope. Eraserhead began to laugh, bewildered by the peculiarity that was Haddock Kakashi.